Today on CityCast Boise. When a group of Mormon women had their LGBTQ children come out to them, they realized that their culture and religion had not prepared them to be supportive. So they formed an organization to empower other parents. Jen Blair, one of the founding members of the group Mama Dragons, is joining me ahead of Pride Weekend to share how they are supporting families in the Treasure Valley in spite of the hostile state politics. It's Wednesday, September 11th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Hey, Jen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. I'm excited to be here.
So I wanted to really just jump in. What is Mama Dragons?
So Mama Dragons is an organization that seeks to support, educate, and empower the mothers of LGBTQ plus humans.
And where did the name Mama Dragons come from? I've never heard that in a different connotation. So where did the name come from?
I actually am a huge fan of this story. It comes from one of our early members, Meg. She had one kid, and all of her siblings came from a huge family, and all of her siblings thought she was a little overprotective. So they called her Mama Bear all the time, Mama Bear, Mama Bear. And when her son came out, she realized that that was just not going to be fierce enough anymore. She was going to need to probably grow some talons and some wings and learn how to breathe fire in order to protect this kid and what she knew about him now.
Oh, wow. And the group welcomes people from all faith or non-faith backgrounds who are looking for education and support. But initially, it was started as a group of Mormon or LDS moms, correct?
Yeah, that little handful of moms in the private message thread were all members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And now it's a little bit different. We find still that the people coming to us are coming from either conservative religious backgrounds or rural communities or conservative states. So not just religious influence, but anything where LGBTQ ideas and people are not embraced and welcomed. They kind of seek refuge with us.
Yeah. And so maybe their child coming out might be one of their first experiences they're aware of with an LGBTQ person.
Absolutely. And they don't know where to go. Stories are okay. But when my own son first came out, I just sat there and stared into space. I just had no idea who to even ask. I remember feeling so desperate that I started Googling to try to find a gay bar so that I could find a gay person to talk to, which is hilarious, right? Like I was going to march my little conservative homeschooling mom self into a gay bar and say, someone tell me what it means to be gay, because I just didn't know and I didn't have anyone to ask. And so it's kind of that level of desperation that people are finding us. Like there's just nowhere to turn.
And how does like that faith tradition or these smaller communities, how does that impact these parents' perspectives on their role as a mom or a parent of an LGBTQ child? And how does that kind of influence your role as Mama Dragons?
It's super interesting to see. I've been doing this for 12 years now. It's super interesting to see as they come, the stories repeat themselves over and over and over. A lot of us, maybe almost all of us, are raised in this environment where we hear a lot of misconceptions and lies about what it means to be LGBTQ. I remember when my son came out, I was like, okay, I've got Anderson Cooper, I've got Ellen DeGeneres, and I've got newspaper articles about senators in airport bathrooms. That was like my entire concept of what it even meant to be gay. So when they come, a lot of times they're coming because their mother heart doesn't match what society's telling them. So like in my case, I knew my son. I knew he wasn't addicted. I knew he wasn't a pervert. I knew he hadn't been molested. And I knew that he didn't need to be changed or fixed by me. I knew that he was perfect. And as I sought support from my faith community and my neighbors, they were giving me the opposite message. It just wasn't resonating with what I knew about this kid. Even like the simplest things where people would give me this big giant hug and with tears in their eyes, they would say, I am so sorry. And like we were supposed to be sad or embarrassed about this kid that we adored. He was virtually perfect as far as we could tell, other than he needed to clean his room. But other than that, he was just this great kid. And so I'm getting all these messages of like, you should be ashamed. You need to put a stop to that. This is something you need to control. And it just didn't resonate with my heart. And so I was trying to find other people who had that similar experience. And over, especially from faith moms, we hear, When I pray, the answers I get do not match what my pastor is telling me, what my parents are telling me, what my best friends are telling me. And so they kind of come in that space of insecurity and knowing that they don't know what to do, but the answers they're getting are not the right ones.
Yeah. So it sounds really like they love their child. They want to support their child, but with their background and their culture and their religious tradition, they just don't have the tools to support and affirm this child that they love.
Yeah. What does it even mean? What does it mean to parent this kid who just told me that they're transgender? Like, what does that mean? I don't even know what to do with it, is kind of the energy that most of our first, like when they first join, mostly what we hear.
How do you think it's, and just to clarify, you were LDS or Mormon when you started being part of Mama Dragons. How did that background influence your perspective on educating parents about supporting their LGBTQ kids?
I was LDS when my child came out, and I have to admit that I loved it. I was like the perfect fit for all of the boxes for my faith, our friends and our social circle and our homeschool group. Like everything that was happening was so perfectly in that little group. But when my first child told me that he was gay, that tilted my whole world right onto its axis. I realized I didn't know anything about how to parent him safely. I didn't know what it looked like. And I, as I was going to people in my community, I was getting like really negative things and losing friends. Every time I would try to talk to somebody and get support about what to do and how to handle this, I would lose another friend. So I have this abundance of empathy for parents who are sort of new to this journey. I remember how afraid I felt. I remember all the nights I cried. I remember knowing that we were going to have to start from scratch and I was going to have to learn how to create boundaries. I wasn't very good at it. And they were going to have to be firm boundaries. And I remember feeling like I was so far behind the curve. He was 16. I had to parent 16 years in like an instant. I remember all of that fear. So when these new moms come in, it's so easy to look at them and talk to them and be like, oh, I've been there. I get it. I'm going to hold your hand and we're going to walk through it together and just make it a little bit easier for you.
So Jen, Mama Dragons particularly focuses on helping support mothers who come from these non-affirming religions or cultures. What kind of education or support do you find that these mothers need or are seeking when they're coming to you from these religions or cultures?
It seems like the first hurdle for a lot of them is just doing some unlearning, some misconceptions that we all acquire in non-affirming spaces. And then after we've done some unlearning, we can start doing learning, statistically, research-based, evidence-based information about what it means to actively love and celebrate your children as they are. We have some pretty weird ideas, I think, about parenting and conformity and safety in society. So we want parents to know what actually works. And we're talking about things like reducing self-harm, reducing drug abuse, reducing sexually risky behaviors or suicide ideation. Those things matter. And then on top of that, we want to preserve family relationships. And so a lot of the education is focused in that realm. And then as parents get those things under their belt, we can talk more about how to navigate the school system, how to address bullying, the legal system or the medical system, if that's something you need, and how to advocate for your kid in public policy.
And you've raised LGBTQ kids in the Treasure Valley. How important has groups like Mama Dragons been for you and your family?
Yeah, we actually started this in the Magic Valley and then moved to the Treasure Valley. And I don't want to sound histrionic or overly dramatic or whatever, but I'm not sure I would have survived without Mama Dragons. And I mean that literally. I mentioned before that we lost our entire community. Not a single friend remained with us before and after our kid came out. And we had 3 younger daughters at the time. All of a sudden, they weren't invited to birthday parties anymore. They weren't allowed to go to their friends' houses. We were shunned, and we heard horrible things through the mouths of these kids that had originated with their parents. I think parenting's pretty hard in general. I don't think anyone calls it an easy journey. But I think
agree.
Yeah, like so hard, right?
Yes.
And I think it's monumentally more difficult if you have to do it alone. Community matters, building community matters, and helping create this community has filled in a lot of holes that were missing when we couldn't stay where we had been.
So when talking about community, the importance of community, this will be no surprise to anyone who's probably listening to this podcast, but there has been an increased frequency of anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ legislation in Idaho. Have you seen more local parents come to Mama Dragons or the local Mama Dragons group for education and support with this rise in all this legislation?
Absolutely. Yes. We have over 200 members in our Western Idaho regional group, and then hundreds of members in our other Idaho subgroups. One of the hardest parts is for parents of privilege. Like, I come from a lot of privilege. I was LDS in an LDS community as a white, straight, married woman with children. And then you have your children who are being targeted, and you don't really know how to do it. You haven't experienced any sort of marginalized status. So as these laws are coming out and kids are being attacked, these parents are trying to figure out how you even deal with oppression. One of the hardest things is that we have to say goodbye to members over and over and over currently who are fleeing the state, becoming medical refugees to protect their kids. And it's almost impossible to articulate how this legislation hits families if you're kind of blind. I was blind to the LGBTQ plus community in Idaho, but this stuff is hitting hard. People don't leave, like move and lose your job and your housing and move away from your family just because you wanted to.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people have the privilege of it's painful during the legislative season. And, you know, if you see on social media or someone talks about it, you're like, oh, yeah, that is really hard. But when it's part of your family, when it impacts a family member or a child, it's with you every day. It becomes part of your everyday conversations, your everyday life. And it becomes, like you said, that balancing act of how much is it worth it to be here when this is impacting my family? And that is a really heavy thing to carry around every single day.
Yeah. Heavy is the word we hear a lot from the community. It just feels heavy to live here. When they travel and come back, you can feel the heavy. The teens usually articulate by asking why the state hates them. Why does Idaho hate me? Why does the legislature hate me? Which is a really horrible thing for any teen to carry.
Absolutely. I can't even imagine as a teenager having a very powerful political body target you year after year after year.
And these brave kids show up and testify and speak up for themselves, and then it doesn't matter.
What kind of resources and support does Mama Dragons offer the parents and families of these kids in the Treasure Valley?
So we actually have so many awesome programs. I'm not even sure all of our members understand everything that they could access if they wanted to. First, our baselines are online communities. We ask questions, we cry together, we celebrate. Sometimes you just need to share a prom photo of your kid without getting lambasted by the haters. Online communities, lots of diversity there. You can meet with people who share your faith or your previous faith, or people who specifically have trans kids, or people who live near you. Here in the Treasure Valley, we meet for brunch once a month. Super great way to remind ourselves we're not alone and just sit with other people who get it, kind of let your defenses down, where the assumption normally might be that you're also anti-queer. We have e-learning courses available, suicide prevention classes, very inexpensive group therapy options, and a podcast specifically targeting this demographic. We make blankets and send them to people who need them. We mail cards. It's just a spot really to support the moms who are spending all of their effort trying to support their kids.
What are some tips that you have for parents who may have just had their child come out to them or may have just found out that their child is queer?
It's going to sound overly simplistic, I know. But the most important thing you can do is just breathe. And remember that the kid in front of you is the exact same person they were yesterday. Thank them for telling you, remind them that you love them. And then you can figure out the rest later. There's amazing resources and we can pass them all along to you if you even just visit our website at mamadragons.org.
And what are some tips you might have for parents who may have had their child come out in the past, maybe didn't have a great response or weren't as affirming as they could have been, but are working on being more supportive and affirming?
Yeah, this happens a lot, right? That initial fear, we sometimes respond badly. We try to remind queer kids that your parents' first response might not be their real response, to kind of give them a little bit of protection. But for those who have made some mistakes and you kind of want to change things, you're not alone. We've all made some mistakes in all of the aspects of parenting. We start off with some wrong ideas. We come from some wrong places, but recognizing that and working to repair it is a great next step. The first part here, obviously, is a real apology. And it might sound like I said some pretty harsh things when you first told me you were a lesbian. I'm sorry that I hurt you. It wasn't my intention, and I've learned a lot. I don't feel like that anymore. But the important part after that is doing, like the doing, like actually changing our behaviors, showing up, celebrating, being thrilled when they get their first boyfriend, they want to talk to you. These actions matter a lot. And the hard part, the like really hard part for parents is that when we change and we've learned we want to heal this relationship, we have to recognize that we're just starting a new path in a new direction. We don't get to have expectations for when they choose to forgive us or when they heal or when they're ready for relationship. We can only fix us. We can apologize and we can do better. And they don't owe us anything. There's no obligation for them to forgive us. Hopefully, eventually they do. Healed relationships are beautiful, but it might take them a long time. You might have done some really rotten things.
I think that is a really good framework to start with, especially if your first response was not affirming or loving. And Jen, I've seen your booth at Boise Pride in years past. Will Mama Dragons be at Boise Pride this year?
Yes, we will. And we would love anybody who wants to come see us, stop by for more information, just to chat for a little bit. And anyone who needs a hug from a mom, maybe a surrogate hug, is always welcome to one.
Thank you so much for joining us. I look forward to seeing you at Pride and seeing all of the support you're giving the community. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. You're awesome, Lindsay.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, we would love it if you would tell a friend about us. We'll be back tomorrow morning with a look at swingers in Boise. You won't want to miss it.